Hello, and welcome to our bite-sized PD for this afternoon. We'll be sharing some characteristics of advanced learners and some details about our program that we offer called SALTA that helps service these advanced and gifted learners.
I'm Angela Oviatt, and this is Hallie Kirk, and we are going to get started. All right, just like every good CSD PD, we have professional development norms. These should be familiar to you. Be committed, be responsible, be respectful, and be safe. And you all are pros at what these look like.
Got this.
All right.
No one's on.
No one's on, so you don't need to mute anything. All right, our learning intentions and success criteria today. Learning intention is to understand the general characteristics of gifted learners, differentiate between gifted and high ability learners, and know the basics of the Canyon SALTA program. And our success criteria is you'll be able to recognize students who may benefit from testing for the SALTA magnet program.
All right. That's us. So if you have any questions, you can contact us at these email addresses and we'll go ahead and get started.
All right. So who are gifted learners?
Put us down. Okay.
We like this quote: students, children, or youth who give evidence of high achievement capability in areas such as intellectual, creative, artistic, or leadership capacity, or in specific academic fields, and who need services and activities not ordinarily provided by the school in order to fully develop those capabilities.
So that's actually in our Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And I highlighted the second part because there are obviously all children, we would say, have evidence of achievement capability in all kinds of different areas. But I think the difference between all students and the students we're identifying as being gifted or advanced learners are that they need supports in schools that we don't often provide by our traditional structures in order to help develop the talents that they have.
Just some characteristics. Gifted students learn and process information differently than their age level peers. They have an asynchronous brain development. Gifted students are not necessarily gifted in all areas. I think that's a common misconception is that, well, they can't be gifted because they're only really good at reading, but they could be gifted in reading. They don't have to be gifted in everything. The 97th percentile of IQ, which is greater than 130, is standard identification criteria nationwide. They perceive and react to the world differently. I'm sure as you're hearing some of these things, you're all identifying current or past students where you're thinking, oh, they kind of fit this mold. Sometimes these students have emotional sensitivities. These students sometimes replenish their energy differently, and they often struggle socially. And sometimes, surprisingly enough, they don't always excel in school.
And that's another really big misconception, I think, is that gifted students are always high achieving, the ones getting 100% on everything. While they can be, that's not always the case. And I think you'll notice that as we go through these characteristics, it's always a case of sometimes, often, maybe, but we're really making general statements about a group of students is always challenging. So not all of these indicators may necessarily be the case, but if the majority are, this is probably a student that would benefit from some type of enrichment or gifted services. And I just wanted to kind of back up on that asynchronous brain development. So that what that means is that because giftedness is contextualized in the brain, that sometimes gifted students, their cognition and their thinking skills and their ability to process information, all of that is going to be something that's maybe far past that level of their age level peers. However, some of their social and emotional development can be delayed. So that might make it even harder when you look at some of those later points where they're trying to, make friends and they're struggling socially because they don't have intellectual peers and they may be a little bit behind where their age level peers are socially. So that's what we refer to as asynchronous development. Okay, so this is kind of again, not all gifted students will be like this, but this is a really good and cute example of what we're talking about when we talk about giftedness.
So tell us about our next special guest.
Reese is he's a dinosaur expert. He knows dinosaurs, he knows prehistoric creatures. to the point where he seems to know more than anybody I know, and he's very good at explaining them to you.
Take a look at Reese on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
Now, what grade are you in?
I'm in kindergarten and I go to first grade for reading.
Oh, first grade for reading. Okay. You have brothers or sisters?
No brothers,
Okay. Sisters?
no sisters.
Uh,
Only my friend Longneck. Hi. Hi.
you have imaginary friends like Kevin. What's up, man? That's good. Do you have any pets besides him?
No, but after the show, I might get a hamster.
You might get a hamster.
It's true, guys.
Yeah. Pretty good. Can I ask some dinosaur questions?
Sure.
Now, where did dinosaurs live?
Well, dinosaur fossils have been found all around the world, even Antarctica. It's true, guys.
What did they eat? Are they meat eaters?
They're plant-eating sauropods.
Plant-eating sauropods.
You know what a sauropod is, anyone? What a sauropod is? A sauropod is a huge plant-eating dinosaur.
Yeah.
And the largest known sauropods are about 50 meters long and about 130 feet tall.
Wow, well, that's pretty big. How do you pronounce that one?
Micropachycephalosaurus.
How do you say it again?
Micropachycephalosaurus.
Okay, spell that one.
Wait, almost there, because after all that laughter, you might have not heard me. Okay. And okay. Now
See, I'm looking at it and I still can't spell it.
Micropachycephalosaurus.
Okay, so,
So tell us about our next special guest.
So in that example, you're seeing a kid who's using a lot of advanced vocabulary, has a really specific interest that they know a lot about. And maybe the social cues where you have a lot of, kids at his age that would be really nervous about being on national television, and he's just engaging and he's in his zone. So that's a good example of a gifted student.
And just to back up a little bit, like where he was using the vocabulary, he's using it appropriately.
Yeah.
Because a
good
lot of
point.
kids can mimic what they see on TV or movies, but in this example, he knew how to use it appropriately, and he was able to have like a deeper conversation about it,
Right.
deeper than you and I could have. Okay, so just a few common myths about gifted learners. They don't need help; they'll be fine on their own. I think that that's pretty obvious why that's a myth. A lot of people think like, oh, they're so smart, they can just do it. But if they're not gifted in all aspects, they might struggle. Maybe Joe can't do the math, but he's super gifted in science. Like we don't know what this little boy he's obviously well-versed in dinosaurs, but can he, do math facts, right?
And I think connecting that to the asynchronous development, that sometimes we assume that they can do well because they're academically doing well, but because of that asynchronous development and having maybe a delayed social and emotional development, there can be struggles like anxiety and depression and as a result of just not fitting in with your peer group. And so they can come at a higher risk for mental illnesses, for even, dropping out of school. There's a high rate of people who could be identified or had been identified as gifted who don't even graduate high school.
Another myth is they make good peer teachers and good role models. A lot of times there's just a lot of pressure on them to be successful, and goes back with why they often drop out is they just don't want that pressure. They want to be in charge of their own learning, right? And not be like responsible for making sure Hallie knows how to do this right, times table, whatever. So that's a common myth. Another myth is that they'll be fine in a regular classroom. while that can be true, if there's a teacher that can offer some enrichment, these kids just crave learning. And just to give like a personal example and some of our credentials, Hallie taught in a gifted classroom for 10 years,
Mhm.
10 years. And I'm a mother of a gifted child that was identified as a kindergartner. And my kid, one of the things that I was able to notice with him is that he just craved more and more learning. So he was in kindergarten and he was, had some high frequency words on those flashcards that he was supposed to memorize. And he did them like that day. He wanted to come home and memorize them that day. And then he went back to school the next day and was like, I can read these words. And she was like, no, these are for all week or all month. And he was like, and he like read them all to her. And she was like, okay. And so like, he just craved this like learning. He was advocating for himself that I'm ready for more. So,
And I think too, with a regular classroom, I like to make a sports analogy here because we're talking academics, but if we have LeBron James playing junior jazz, right, he can play basketball there, but is his talent developing if he's not playing with people who are at his level? So I think it's, if you look at it that way, you know, every kid deserves to learn at school, regardless of what level that they're coming in at.
totally fair. Okay, so another myth is that everyone's gifted. And while as a mom, we like to say, you know, like my kid is really smart, right? But I have 4 kids, and there's definitely a noticeable difference between my one child who has been identified as gifted and my other 3 kids who, as a mama bear, I want to say are amazing.
They have
right?
gifts, they have
gifts,
talents, right?
But they're not all gifted. My second kid definitely is gifted. He has a thirst for learning. He's constantly investigating and researching and pulling out. He'll walk in and be like, do you know a fun fact? I read this today. And, and so,
thinking divergently, I think
yeah.
too, is a big indicator as well.
The next common myth, acceleration is socially harmful. There's a lot of research about retention being harmful, but acceleration has shown to be more successful.
Yeah, it's actually been really successful as an intervention for kids in terms of academic giftedness. And there's always that worry that, well, socially, they're not mature enough to be with kids that are older. But if you can offer the right environment, like a SALTA program or a gifted service program, they're then with their intellectual peers, and that can make the world of difference. So there's actually a lot of good research that supports acceleration.
And back to your other point about mental
Mhm.
health, it's good for them to be with people that can challenge them intellectually. So it's good for that. Another one is gifted programs are elitist.
And they can be.
They can be, because in many places, those that are tested are those that have access to it. And that's something that I feel like Canyons is really trying to address and own, that maybe in the past there has been this stereotype that it's been elitist a little, but they're really trying, by coming into the schools and doing the testing on site, having access more equitable for everyone. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think, you know, traditionally gifted programs kind of became as the kids that were performing really well on indicators that were already available to them, right? So it was, if you're teaching, like we have multilingual gifted learners who may not know a word of English, but their cognition is far beyond their peers. So the assessments that we were using would be a barrier for them being able to get the services to be in a gifted program. So rather than leveraging what they know and helping support their language development, we would just kind of not offer services, not us specifically, but collectively as an education system in the United States. And then when we don't offer those services, sometimes they would even be referred for special education and all kinds of, you know, inequitable things. So.
Another myth is that students with failing grades and poor test scores can't be gifted, right? So you get this low data and you're like, oh, well, he can't be gifted. He's failing my math class. When the reality is he's not being challenged, or he already knows the content and he's thinking, well, why should I do this work? Like I can already do it. And so.
And as I get older, if I do it and I have to do more work, why would I do it?
Well, that's a common thing, right?
Right.
So like, you're really good at this and I need to help these kids over here in this group. So here you do another practice sheet, right? And so now it's like, you're kidding me. I had to do 10. Now I've got to do 20. Like what's the motivation to keep going? So there's a lot, like you referenced, there's a lot of evidence to support that many gifted or previously identified as gifted students do poorly and end up dropping out.
And I think that kind of nicely transitions to the next one about compliance and being teacher pleasers and love going to school. While that can certainly be the case, because a school structure is often not really built for the way that they think, they often can be really resistant and have a lot of behavioral problems and a lot of compliance issues because of that lack of engagement, of not feeling like they fit in, of feeling like their voice isn't heard because they're looking at things a different way. And so offering, targeted interventions for students that are at a higher level, kind of the opposite of your RTI tier 3, if it's an inverted triangle, right? That's how you can support students like that.
And the last common myth is that gifted students can't have disabilities. There's been a lot of research in the last 5 to 7 years about twice exceptional students and about how a lot of these students, part of the rethinking of their brain, right, is that they still have the same cognitive processes that a able-bodied person would have, but they in addition have this disability. And so they've started doing more and more research on it to support that these 2E, they call them 2E, twice exceptional students, that there's a large population of students with disabilities that can also be identified as gifted learners.
Yeah, and I think there's, we've seen, I think most of us are familiar with the correlation between autism and giftedness, and it used to be referred to as Asperger's. But there's also ADHD and dyslexia and giftedness having a high correlation as well. So part of that is, there's a lot of neuroscience coming out right now that's trying to investigate maybe why that's the case. All right, so here's just a list, and you can pause it, of some general characteristics from the National Association of Gifted Children. And again, not every gifted learner is going to have all of these things, but these are some general characteristics that maybe you have students in your class that you're noticing a lot of these resonate for.
And I just think that this list would be a good thing to just kind of have as a readily available resource that you could kind of check and balance, right? Oh, my kid is doing this. Oh, that is showing a sign of creativity. Okay, so we give them a little bit more credit for the things that sometimes we find annoying.
Yep,
and bothersome.
exactly. Most definitely. All right, so when we talk about services that we offer for gifted students, it's actually part of our Utah code, and that is the bill right up there, but all LEAs in Utah are required by law to have a method for identifying gifted and talented students for some type of acceleration opportunities, which can look different district to district. But that has to be contingent on every student achieving growth annually at the highest level. And this is really tricky because you have kids that's ceiling out on all of your benchmarks at the very beginning of the year. So how are you going to be able to show that they learned anything all year? And that gets into like, can we go deeper? Is there acceleration that needs to happen? And that's kind of the crux of the situation with gifted ed, is trying to find assessments that are really appropriate for identification, but also for instruction. And then this identification process needs to be using multiple assessment instruments. So it's not just, do they do well on RISE at the end of the year? Great, they're gifted. It has to have instruments that maybe test their cognitive abilities, their critical thinking skills. It has to be accessible for students that might be multilingual learners or have disabilities, so that it's really getting at the way that their brain works and not what information that they've already been exposed to through their environment. So in Canyon School District, we have a magnet program right now that is called the SALTA program, which is supporting advanced learners toward achievement. Currently, it's housed at 2 elementary schools. So it starts in 1st grade and it goes 1st through 5th grade at both Sunrise Elementary and Peruvian Park Elementary. After that, students that choose to continue the program would then go to Midvale Middle School for the SALTA program, at which point by high school, it dissolves, and then they can a lot of them follow this international baccalaureate pathway at Hillcrest, or they choose to specialize a little bit more in their neighborhood schools, looking at advanced placement classes or concurrent enrollment opportunities.
And just really quick, a lot of families choose to not follow on in middle school. And in our experience, that was what we had decided to do with my son, is we were going to just put him in the neighborhood middle school because it was easier. It was carpool was more convenient, right? Like all those mom
Mhm.
things. And he went to the neighborhood middle school for about 5 days. And he texted me in the middle of the day one day and he was like, Mom, I made a really big mistake. I should have stayed in the SALTA program. And I was like, okay, tell me why. And I was thinking maybe he was a little homesick from his friends because he'd been with that other peer group for 5 years. And he didn't even bring up the friends. He was like, school is just too easy. I know how to do all of this already. Nobody is helping me think. And I thought that was a really
Really insightful.
insightful thing
Yeah.
for a 12-year-old, 11-year-old to think like, this isn't where I should be. I need to have somebody help me think. And I thought it was also really insightful that he was willing to advocate for himself. And so
Definitely.
we were able to make some calls, and within, a 2-week time frame, he was able to get put at Midvale Middle and start back on that path. And it's been
And I mean, evidence of heightened self-awareness, which is a characteristic of giftedness. So it's that's really, really awesome. So in our SALTA program, how it is different from a neighborhood school is that we're really focusing on teaching to think. So how are kids thinking? Are we teaching these analytical and critical thinking processes? Where are we building in opportunities to take what they learn at school and extend it into either real world practical application or solving novel problems that maybe are in a different dimension that they haven't been exposed to? So we're really extending, but we're also making it more rigorous by simply taking the content and differentiating it so that it is deeper and more complex, rather than here's a bunch, you can do this math problem, now do 10. Where you can do this math problem, here's a problem that may or may not have the same pattern. Can you use what you know about this problem to justify how you would solve this? So you can kind of just see it's a tweak in instruction, and it's a tweak in, there's a piece of lint. It's a tweak in instruction that not all teacher preparation programs really explore. So these are some of this is for our SALTA program. This is kind of how we've crafted what we're hoping to do with our program. And then in a SALTA classroom, we're really working on differentiating up for all levels at different points in instruction. So not just differentiating at the end, like we've all done the same thing and now it's the end. You get this option, you get this option, you get this option. But throughout, what do you already know about this? Here's some options for how you can show me what you know about it. What do you want to explore in terms of what you could do with that information? So we're really teaching them what to do with information that they have rather than how to acquire that information. So transferability of learned skills is a big focus, flexibility and task complexity and working arrangements and modes of expression. We do a lot of pre-assessment to see what students already know so that we can move quicker and compact through the curriculum and spend more time on extension and enrichment rather than reviewing things that they already know. And then we're really just focusing on helping students take ownership of their own learning and giving them some agency in how they do it, which really helps with a lot of those social emotional struggles that we've seen, because they now have a vested interest in their own learning and they feel like they have some say over what they're doing.
Gives them some ownership.
Right. So to qualify for the SALTA program, we use a primary assessment measure, but we also look at a variety of other data. Primarily, we have students take what's called the cognitive abilities test. And this really just assesses how they think about problems, how their spatial reasoning skills, how they can identify patterns and relationships. And there is a verbal and a quantitative and a nonverbal portion. So this is administered with their same age level peers. For kindergarten and first graders, they hear their directions read to them out loud and they answer on an iPad. For second grade and up, they just take it self-paced on their Chromebooks. And then to take this test, or actually I skipped ahead. So once they've taken this test, the students have registered to take the test. Our testing team goes out to the schools. They take the test in the schools during the school day. Once we have all of that data back, we're really looking to identify the 95th percentile nationally, which is typically your top 3% of students. So instead, a lot of programs, they'll say, okay, all of these kids qualify, but we're going to take the top score and we're going to do a cutoff of 30 students for 3rd grade because we don't have class sizes that are big enough. What we do in Canyons is we really want to offer that service to anybody who wants it and can qualify. So we don't cap the class sizes. We base our FTE on every year on how many kids qualified that incoming year, which means that it's a lot of adjustment, and that's why we test so early in the school year. And then they can qualify in a few different ways. So if they're stronger in one domain than another, we use that. We also use the standard error of measurement, which varies by grade level, but we really dig into the data and make sure that we're looking for that top 3%. And then right now, our testing window for registration is open on our website. You've probably seen some flyers. There was a banner on our district website, a parent square and a Skylard went out. So we're doing some marketing, and then parents can sign up their student to be tested. That window then closes on September 30th.
And I think
So
that's where we need their help.
that's where we need your help. So
Because that's next week. So we obviously can't be in every school.
right.
And so you know your kids better than we do anyway. So if you're thinking about that, maybe this kid, you know, they got their Acadians back and they're all blue, and then you're noticing that they kind of think a little bit differently and they're processing things a little bit differently, it would be worth a conversation next week at conferences to just visit with the parents and suggest this. You suggesting it commits you to nothing. It commits them to nothing, but it at least plants the seed, because what we've learned is that a lot of families, unless they're already in the system and know how it works, they just don't know.
Right. So if you have students that you think would benefit from testing, again, suggesting it, no, there's nothing you're held accountable for. And you're really not, you don't have to be the one that's identifying them as gifted. You're just saying maybe they get tested and we can see if this might be an option for them. So then once that window closes on September 30th, our testing team goes out to schools and administers our assessments. And then when that window closes right before Thanksgiving break, we go through all of our data, we look at which kids qualified, and then we make contact with families asking whether or not they are interested in signing up for the program for the following school year. There is an appeals window in January for, you know, if there was a testing environment where something went haywire and they feel like it's not a good measurement of their student skills. We have an appeals committee that's a third party that goes through and kind of looks at if there's other assessments we might need. And then we have a deadline for families to either accept or decline placement for the next school year. So that's tricky because parents don't know which school, whether it's Peruvian or Sunrise, until they've said, yes, we want to do SALTA. They accept the program, but maybe not the school. Once we know how many kids have accepted the program, then we go through and we place them. And we try to place all students where it's their closest school. If they've got a sibling there, if they're already attending that school, we look at boundaries. But we try to make sure that that's as even at both school sites as possible, so that one's not huge class sizes and the other one is smaller.
Because you still only have a limited amount of
Right.
FTE per that grade level, right?
Right. And the FTE is done through both schools as a program, not as part of the school. So it's a little tricky there, which again is why we test so early. And then after their placement notification goes out, they would then, if they still chose to be in the program, they would enroll in either Peruvian Park or Sunrise in the fall for that next school year. So that is our SALTA program and gifted learners in a nutshell. If you are interested and you want to know more, we both teach our endorsement course for gifted and talented, and it is pretty much all virtual. And it's in collaboration with UVU. So you do get college credit that can go toward a master's degree or a lane change. And we are in the middle of it's a 4-course sequence. And then there's some extra competency things you do on top of that. So we're offering 2 courses a year. So you would have, it's over the course of 2 years that you would have an endorsement.
And it's early enough in this course. If you were interested in getting in right now, we could probably make
We
that
just
happen.
started
We
one.
just
So
started
if
after
you're,
Labor Day. So we have this one, and then we'll offer one starting in January. and you would be halfway through the endorsement.
Yep. And the one we're teaching right now is assessment in gifted education. So if you're interested in that, reach out to either of us. And then there's just some other resources you can explore. And I think that's it.
Please reach out if we can do anything to help you.
Yes. And thank
Thank
you for
you.
watching. Oh, this is how you get credit.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.